get some sense of what's happening. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dwayne Hemiestua. I was one of the participants in a cohort through Change Labs and had the really cool privilege and honor to take part in some of the programs that Change Labs offers. And today is the day 2 of the 3-day session that we're going to be doing. And welcome back. So if you've been here before, it's really cool to catch up and touch base on all of these concepts around the business idea validator, and then walking people through how we can assist and guide them in working with the idea validator worksheet. It's a worksheet that we've introduced at some point in the past. Let me just see if I can screen share real quick. So ultimately today we want to cover the solution components and aspects of the business idea validator, customer segments, and what competition looks like when it comes to validating your business ideas. And this is essentially the start of the process for vetting your business idea and your concepts as you're going through the strategies of how to actually see if your business is worthy of pursuing, or you're in that phase of trying to get a sense of what the business might actually do, or if it's even viable. And this idea validator worksheet is just one aspect of really fleshing out the concepts for the business that you want to develop and build. And I know we've probably paired this up with the BMC before in the past, right? And we want to kind of give a sense of what that looks like when you're working with a worksheet like this. The worksheet is available online if you haven't downloaded it yet. I don't know where that quick link, did you do a quick link?
The events, whenever they register, there's a hyperlink to the PDF.
Yeah, so the hyperlink to the PDF is there available if you guys want to download it, if you haven't downloaded it yet. But it's easy to access, and once you grab that worksheet, it allows you to get a sense of what all the key components and parts of the idea validator worksheet looks like. And I think what we want to do is just go through the entire process. So, but before we get totally into the meat of it all, there's a series of things that we have to point out. And let's see, what's the next slide? Oh, it goes right into it. So the business idea validator worksheet has a series of boxes, at least in regards to the specific one that that we will have you download if you can download it. The main thing is that we want to encourage you to use it as a template for just tossing out ideas, trying to release or unleash all the little concepts that you have in your mind about what you want to pursue, especially if the idea is really fresh and it's something that you want to figure out and suss out and see if it's something that you even want to do. And I know for starters, the one thing that I always did was I took notes at the very beginning of my process. And this worksheet that you're seeing now is just an example. It's a sample of my specific company and business idea that we workshopped through the Change Labs cohort system over a course of a year. And it allowed me to actually really experiment and play with it. So the reason why we're showing it too here is twofold. The ideas that I initially had, I drafted them up and I put them in red, so you get a sense of what was sort of the first concepts, the initial concepts when I was developing the idea for this business called Fairground Collective, and the concepts or ideas as they evolved over time. And each time I went back to the business idea validator, I took moments to kind of refresh my mind or pull back and take a whole new perspective on what it would actually look like as I was fleshing out the business, and as I was trying to really take a glance at what is it that I really truly want to do with the business. And so you can get a sense of it as you look at this specific worksheet. You can see the red markings or the early ideas of the concept, and my sort of working through what it might theoretically look like. And then the blues are sort of eventually, naturally, organically, the way it unfolded. And I started to really get to a place where I knew that some of those really super developed concepts were going to be the way or the pathway that I was going to follow and flesh out as I was moving through this. So this just kind of serves as a really good example. And I think we might have this available still too, right? To download at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is also a really good way to test your idea out over and over and over repeatedly. And there's nothing wrong. There's no one right way or one wrong way to do all of this. But it's really good to just take a moment in your early stages of fleshing out your business to look at what this idea validator can do for you. And you want to use it to your advantage because it's only going to benefit you versus confuse you. And that's the whole point of this this workflow and this process, is to really get those ideas out so that you can see how things line up, how things sort of mesh with the concepts you initially started with, or even new ideas that you kind of draft out or draw out as you're moving through this. So you want to move on to so this is, I love this this slide because it just showcases several pieces that are important. And that's like taking the original concept of the business idea and eventually, naturally, you want to get to a place where you're going to turn it into concepts and manifest it into the concepts that are going to go into the business model canvas. And the business model canvas is another worksheet that we've been encouraging people to download to as a part of or in tandem with the stages of fleshing out your business. But the business idea validator really helps you kind of pinpoint exactly what direction you want to go. Once you choose that direction, you sort of adapt it into this business model canvas, and taking all those concepts and putting them into the business model canvas is sort of a sure, a sure way to accomplish what you ultimately need to address those blocks or those points in the business model canvas. And a lot of that is naturally going to manifest and be pulled into what is eventually your business plan. And the business plan is ultimately where you want to get to at some point in the stages of developing and fleshing out your business. So just kind of consider it as a multi-stage, a multi-tier process, with the business idea validator sort of being the launching piece or component of your business idea, fleshing it out and taking it through these stages, bringing all that information into the business model canvas so you can do a lot more work to really kind of hone in on what exactly is important. And then those pieces that are important are ultimately going to get brought into the business plan itself. So this just demonstrates that, and it's a really, really cool way to kind of visually see that. You want to do the next slide? And we've been using this concept of the pinion fry bread truck. And it's been really fun to just kind of see the evolution of it in terms of, what you want to do with taking a concept or a business idea and utilizing an idea like this, which we just generically call a pinion fry bread truck. And what's great about it is that as we do the next sort of stages and as the day unfolds or this session unfolds today, you can see how important it is to keep coming back to this original concept of what your vision is and why the business idea validator helps to do that assessment and figure out what ultimately you're trying to do. And so some of the larger questions we want to ask as we're going into this is why are we even starting this business in the first place? Who are we starting it for? And is someone ultimately already doing this, a similar concept or something comparable to what you've already tried to do? And we know that in the world of quick, access to food, a fry bread truck like this is always an idea that will work really well, probably anywhere on the reservation, especially if it's mobile. But we're going to talk about why it's important to consider the mobility aspect of it as we move through this. So we're going to go into the next section or next slide, and then point out what it means to really reflect on why you have to think about the business that you're going to do or the business you want to pursue. So for starters, you want to ask the question, the hard question. And I know for some people it's kind of difficult to do, but you have to ask that question: does your business idea actually really truly solve a human problem? And we've always dreamt of and had these fantastical ideas of starting a business probably at some point, but we never really looked at the core question of that business idea. Are we doing it because we're actually addressing a real human problem? And you have to ask yourself that as you move through fleshing out your business. And then, the other thought is that, are you actually doing this because you want to look cool? Is this a business that you want to do because it feels like something you just kind of want to show off to your family and friends? Or is it truly because you care to solve a human problem in your community, on Navajo Nation, or in the Hopi community where we're based? I mean, we're on the cusp of it. So you're going to serve two communities. Why do you want to do this business in the first place? And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. And then this kind of builds on of like what we talked about of yesterday with Raquel's session. We jump so quickly to the why of everything, and for the business idea validator, the first three squares, as we talked about here, I can show you. Just going a little quickly forward for a second, we'll go back. But of course, like the first two sections, talking a lot about the business idea. Can we describe the business idea? Not really why we got to that point of the business, but essentially like talking about like what the actual operations are. So again, yesterday was a recap about you guys jotting down a ton of your bullet points of how it would operate, where it would operate, talking about the overarching, if this business could be achieved in goal setting of 3 to 6 and 5 years outward of what you would be doing with your business. And then this is finally when we're kind of breaking into that a little bit of the why of, okay, where was the opportunity that you saw this? I think we were talking with some individuals yesterday that they were like, there's no Airbnbs on Hopi. There's no lodging on Hopi. I would love to turn one of my places that my homestead into an Airbnb and into creating lodging for emergency help support individuals, as well as like for individuals who are coming to Hopi for certain meetings and things like that. So like they're talking about a lot about the opportunity here, and then we're building more into that why today of the solutions portion. So Dwayne will be talking a lot about through the other half of it of where your business comes into play. That's why we're talking about those two previous questions of does your business idea solve a real human problem? This is going in depth a little bit of if you ever had business coaching before, or you go on other types of seminars, I was talking about the why, the business why of starting your business. And it's kind of stems from this combination of the solution and the problem coming together. And those two portions help build your why of why you're starting your business. So, of course, as Dwayne said, today, we're going to be going through these two questions, starting day 2 with a ton of questions of why we're starting this business. Who we're starting it for is someone already doing this. So, exactly those two things. And this is kind of building upon of what we covered yesterday. So I'm going to push it back off to Dwayne.
Yes, she brought up some really good points, and the ideas or concepts to consider is going back as you move through this process, reflect on those first two sections that you all covered yesterday, and just rehash out why you're doing it and why you're even pursuing it. And then as you move into the next set of squares or boxes that we call them on the worksheet, it's easier for us to manage as we flow through it or move through it. So back to this concept of the problem and solving the problem. The third box or the third square that we are looking at on the idea validator sheet is addressing this issue of the solution. What do you offer that solves a problem, that eases a pain point, or provides a benefit or some type of gain? Just trying to help people does not necessarily make a business. You have to actually really, at the core, address an issue like a pain point. And we talk about pain points in developing the business ideas. And then we also talk about truly offering a benefit and what are those benefits. And then we'll get into more details about how important those benefits are, especially when it comes to competition and your competitive advantage. But we'll get to that eventually. So for the solution, we can move to the next slide. The concept around this is, what is it that you want to ultimately do to help address the pain point? So just imagine, again, this concept of the pinion fry bread truck, and you've come up with this brilliant idea and you want to start your own flavor and flair on this idea or concept of a food truck, and you want to put it out there. But you've sort of questioned, like, if I'm going to do a food truck, is that really going to solve the pain points that my customers have? And is it really truly a food truck? Maybe it's actually a small stand, or a brick and mortar spot, or maybe a booth at the flea market or on the side of a highway, next to a gas station. So there's all these concepts and ideas around wandering through, or what I call the wander through this terrain of all these concepts of how you can actually present the same concept, but repackaged or reframed or repositioned in a different sort of style. And does that actually address the pain point that you're trying to get at? So maybe the solution truly is a little booth on the side of the highway next to a highly trafficked area, and you know for a fact that that's where they're going to go to get their fry bread, or some specialty that you offer with your food delivery service or the concept. And so as you flesh out your ideas, you want to keep coming back to the solution. Are the concepts that you're presenting, as you flesh them out, do they actually solve the problem? And it's okay to keep rehashing this concept out as you work through the worksheet, and try to figure out what is it that ultimately you want to do to address that problem. So the next slide. So in this journey, obviously, a part of that work that you have to do for trying to figure out if your solution, if your business idea is truly going to help solve those pain points, you want to do the research. And we're always encouraging people to do that initial research at the very onset of your business, as you flow through it, as you move through it. And one of the best and most sort of amazing ways to really get a good sense of how your business idea might actually flow or work is to do questionnaires and surveys. So we've always encouraged people to just do their research, which means go out into the community and just kind of put posit these questions about, like, what do you want to do to help address that problem that you're trying to solve. So you can tailor your surveys, tailor your questionnaires around those concepts, and ask all the people you can get a hold of, if you sold such and such product, or if you built such and such food stand, would they actually be willing to purchase it? And does it help solve the problem? And then more importantly, the specific thing you're trying to sell, does it offer them a benefit? Does your fry bread have that really nice flavor? And is it made in a unique way that separates itself from all the other products that other people sell? Would people purchase it? And that's what you want to kind of pursue in your questionnaires and your surveys, and ask lots of questions back, because those engagements that you have are really awesome with the people that you come into contact with. So the next slide, we can talk about also, what does the root cause of the problem identify, or what does it highlight in this journey, in this process? Because you'll discover the physical causes of some of these problems that exist, human causes, organizational causes. And what we mean by that too is that if you look at the root cause of a problem, say it's you're seeing the impacts of diabetes in your community, and for a fact that you want to offer fry bread, but everybody else is using the craziest, weirdest lard or whatever it is that they put in the fry bread, and maybe that's not exactly what you want to do. So you want to be fancy, and you come up with a concept of using an alternative oil that is much more healthier, much more tastier, and actually doesn't impact the diabetes in the community. And so maybe that could be part of the root cause to a problem that you're trying to address. And so it could mean switching up your ingredients, or switching up how you approach it, to really completely impact the way you solve that problem as you move through trying to set up the business. So that's one way to kind of think about it and process what it means to actually get to the root cause of the problem. And on the next slide, we have the obvious sort of like discussion around what can that solution do as you're defining what that root problem is. And also in the way you put the concept together, is your business idea that solution itself? Will it have all the features or the concepts that you want to incorporate to be able to provide truly that solution to the community? And so maybe it is specifically a certain type of ingredient that you put in that fry bread, or maybe it's a certain way that you prepare not just the fry bread, but the ingredients that go on top of the fry bread. If you sell it as a complete taco, maybe that's a feature that you're going to use to separate yourself from all the other businesses, and you're going to move in that direction. So taking all these ideas and concepts around what can you do to help develop that answer to that problem, or what can you do to develop that solution to that problem, and it might mean providing something so unique that nobody else offers, and instantly that already separates you from all the other businesses. And then on the next slide too, what we've done in terms of encouraging people to research when you're trying to discover what the problem is looking at the customer base and how are they affected. Look at the community, go into your community and go door to door, and it makes a huge difference. Or post up at the local gas station or grocery store, maybe outside bashes or whatever, and just ask people these questions and figure out like who actually responds to you and what type of customers do you want to start to develop when you build out what this concept will look like. Some of these areas to consider are anything and everything from like the personas you want to develop in the group sort of category, or the target audiences you want to go after. What are these affected customers going to get out of this solution, or what do they benefit from all of this? And then a part of that is also just looking at the very specifics in the problem. As you tell it, you want to flesh it out like a narrative. You want to tell it like a story, so that as you describe it or as you explain it, you're touching on all these really cool specifics about concepts in the business that work. And then also, what are the costs or consequences of the problem, and how it presents that when you look at the overall scope also of the problem. How many people are actually affected by that problem? And it's something to just consider as you research exactly those pain points that you're trying to solve. And then on the next slide too, what we have pulled back and looked at too is like, how does that solution that you've sort of arrived at, or the concept that you're imagining, how does that impact the customer segments? And that's what we're going to transition into. Or how does it impact the potential customers? And you want to consider the huge market that exists out there, but to niche down, or to really bring it down and dwindle it down to very specifics in terms of a customer base that you want to identify. That's how you can start to get a sense of who is the most likely to want or need or buy that product or service. And that's ultimately what you want to move towards in your customer segment or customer segmentation. And how would you describe that customer? And I mentioned just briefly earlier, developing personas is one way to really get an assessment of what those customers look like, what type of profiles they fit, and what does that mean in its entirety when you're looking at large customer base and trying to identify exactly who would be attracted to your Pinon food truck, and specifically the type of food you're going to offer. What's that customer segment look like? And that's what we want to sort of identify and go through in this section. So the potential customers, one of the key things to consider when you look at potential customers is we all want to cast the net wide, and we all want to assume that everybody's going to be a customer. But that's sort of a gross way to look at what it means to actually identify who your customers are, because sure, there's a lot of customers out there that we want to go after, but really, truly, at the end of the day, the true potential customers are the customers that you're going to identify are the actual people who are going to come by to your food truck or come by the food stand, and actually engage and actually purchase it. And we know for a fact that there's certain energies and attitudes with certain potential customers too that could easily play into who those customers ultimately will be. And you want to take stock of that. You want to take account of all those energies and attitudes that some of the people have when you're going out there and doing the surveys and trying to get a sense of who that potential customer base could be and what does that look like. So that aspect of customer segmentation, in the next slide, the way we ask or posit the questions, how do you know that they're going to actually purchase it? How do you know that these customers are going to be willing to come out and support something like this? And we talk about starting locally first, anytime you're developing a business. But are those the only customers you want to go after? And eventually you want to develop and create a system where you're actually able to tap into a whole wide spectrum of customers, but with those specific profiles or personas in mind. And this is where we ask those hard questions. How do you know exactly who will want to purchase your products or services? And why is it important to believe that the customer is always the most important when it comes to considering who's going to be your customer segment and who's going to come out and purchase the products that you sell or any of the services that you offer for that matter. So just to recap really quickly again, and it's important to come back to this because we have to ask ourselves as we go through this business idea validator, why are we even starting this business? Who are we starting it for? And is someone already doing this? And this stage in the customer segment portion, we're actually looking at who are we starting it for, right? Because if we've already identified what that solution is going to be, we're looking at who the actual customers are going to be, and are they actually legitimately going to buy the product or service? And so that's one thing to keep in mind as you move through the business idea validator. And don't be afraid to keep asking yourself those questions, because the hard questions in the surveys, as you do the questionnaires, as you go out and reach out to potential customers, is to ask them those questions, because there's a way that they're going to be able to help you develop what that's going to look like, how you can flesh it out. So in this next slide, we want to just take a look at how that fits in to the work around customers and building customer segmentation and the customer base. So I pointed out, like, what is, who has actually purchased the product or service, and is there that customer base out there? We already know that we've heard this phrase that the customer is always right. And there's a lot of truth and validity to that, because if you put the customer at the center of all your key business decisions, is always going to bring you back to you being able to validate that what you're doing is actually the right thing to do. It's a great way to justify and warrant what you're doing, the work and the effort that you're putting into your business. And it's going to also validate that the pathway that you're on with your business is actually working. So putting the customer at the center is always really super critical. And we always highly recommend to never forget that or never ignore that. But in the next slide, just to sort of reemphasize that point, the survival of the business, your business, ultimately depends on that ability to attract and retain those customers. So once you develop that customer segment and that base, you want to look at those profiles. Do they exist elsewhere? And how do we continue to scale and grow and attract more of the same customers? And then tweak and modify what you offer in terms of your business services or your business food product concept ideas. What else can you add to it that will give an offering to people to bring in more customers? And always put the customer at the center. And that's going to be one true sort of way to validate that what you're doing is actually going to work. And you can get that sense in the surveys and the questions that we talked about. And then in the next slide too, as well, this little customer segment sort of profile portion, or the work that you want to do around building that profile, is to figure out who your customer is and look at the problem that you're trying to solve. And you have to constantly ask yourself that as you move through it. So we've developed this, our answer in response to this is that customer segment, all the potential customers, say for the pinion fry bread truck idea, is to look at who are the locals first, and then really flesh out like what does it mean to go after those customers or that customer base that's right there in the heart of Pinion. So if it's called the Pinion Fry Bread Truck, you take that idea and you go out into the community in Pinion and you ask around and find out like who actually truly is going to buy the products that you're offering. And as you start to get a sense of what those local customers are going to do, you can get a sense of what other communities or how they might respond. And then as you extend that survey, that questionnaire out there, you start to figure out that maybe there's a certain segment in Shanto that actually prefers a certain twist to the mutton on the fry bread, or in Tuba City, they want a fancier version of how the fry bread is cooked. Maybe it's with avocado oil or whatever it is. And you start to develop these ideas around what is it that helps you build and flesh out that customer base, that customer segment that you're going after. And then some of the other ideas is like, ask the hard questions, who can actually afford it, and at what price can they afford it, and how much do they want to pay for it, and who are the customer types that are actually going to pursue the business services or the business products that you actually offer. And then a part of that is tailoring it also to location, or tailoring it to a specific sort of area where maybe tourists might be, or shifting and moving around. Because if you decide to go from a permanent sort of trailer, or a truck or something that's static and kind of in one location, maybe the idea is to start moving it around so that you really get a true sense of where it works well, and start to explore those ideas of location, or is it how people actually drive over to you? All those questions can be answered as you develop the customer segment personas and profiles in this part of the Idea Validator Worksheet. And then on the next slide too, we have to ask ourselves, as we develop out the customer segmentation, what if I want to appeal to everyone? And I brought this up. You look at the wider scope and the wider sort of broad market base. And the tendency is that we want to try to appeal to everyone. But as I mentioned in the next slide, as we demonstrate, what happens is as a business owner, you're going to start to realize that the types of customers that you're going to go after are going to vary. And this is a good example of that, just to demonstrate what this could mean. So we have an artist who's created these amazing, beautiful wallets, or leather pieces that are essentially billfolds. And how is that artist going to market? How is that entrepreneur going to market this? And what type of customers is he going to go after? And so you have to look at the broad segmentation, but then also start to identify like, who is it that's truly going to purchase this? So on the next slide, we can see that part of the persona or the profiles that you want to create is looking at the various types of personalities or characters that will want to come out and actually purchase this. The personas, are the representation of the customer base that will actually want to buy the product. So, for instance, here we see that we have like your hip, cool, urban kid who actually likes the wallet because he thinks it's made out of leather and it's super slick and cool. And then you have the classic old school cowboy who actually really appreciates an old-fashioned leather wallet with like a hip, new, modern twist. And so he might be the type of persona that's going to pursue purchasing one of these products. So you want to really break it down and show and demonstrate like, what are those personas, or what are those personality types that would actually go after a product that you're going to offer, and start to create that segmentation and identify exactly who that could be, and what that will look like. So Holly, in the next slide, I'm going to just show, again, back to the potential customers. As you work through that middle box in the Idea Validator Worksheet, don't be afraid to make a lot of notes about all those potential customers. And what I usually encourage is like draft up another document with all the various types of customers that you can imagine going after. I mean, it could be done by demographics, it could be done by areas, it could be done by personality types, or even age. And maybe there's only certain types of age groups that will probably come out and buy your product or service. And use that as a worksheet to just continue to flesh out what that entire customer segmentation will look like. So back to the Idea Validator Worksheet. As we move through this, we get to ultimately the competition, and you want to take a hard look at what that means. How are your potential customers currently solving the problem or need that you've identified, and how well does the competition actually solve that problem? So you're going to start to analyze what your competition in that local market that you're working in or that you're wanting to pursue, and how do they do it? Start to look at all the competitors that exist in that area. And in the next slide, I'm going to look at the questions that we ask ourselves. How are your potential customers currently solving that problem? And if you start to really identify what your competition is doing to help address certain problems, you might find that there's a niche solution that you come up with that is so unique and different than what your competitors are doing. And that's going to help you validate that your business idea is credible in some regards, because those competitors are ultimately trying to stand apart too. So if you can really double down on what makes your product or service really stand out, it helps you address, what can you do to really solve the problem that you're trying to identify, because you sort of reverse engineer here the competitors that you're up against, and see how they've tackled solving the problem, and they might have come really close to solving the core problem that you're trying to address, or else they might have not completely come close, and you can identify exactly what those gaps are, and where those shortfalls are, so you can really beat out the competition. In the next slide, I'm going to just kind of go over again those questions that you have to ask, the hard questions. What does real competition look like, and how do you differentiate yourself and your business from the competitors? And then will customers actually want to pay for the products and services? And we keep coming back to that question of, will your customers actually want to pay for the products and services? Because that helps you identify how you can separate yourself from the competition. So in the next slide, Holly, who's offering the same or similar product or service in your market, right? If you ask yourself that question, that's how you're going to identify who truly is your competition. You might suggest that a local gas station is selling fry bread also, but are they truly offering something similar in that same market? If you've identified that market is really strictly solving the problem, they might just generically have a product, a fry bread at their local gas station, but they might not have all the bells and whistles that you offer. So you have to look at that, and what does that mean in your market? So ask yourself these questions as you move through the Idea Validator Worksheet. So this next question that we pointed out, and we talk about this, and as we coach too, one of the things that we keep coming back to is creating this checklist or a pseudo checklist of some sort that helps you go through and identify what the products or services that you're offering, and does it sort of meet all these various needs or pain points, because there will be always a series of them as you're fleshing out the larger sort of market and where the product fits or where the service fits. And that's how you get to a place of really figuring out the positioning for your product. How does it actually fit in? So as you answer these questions, you can start to see how your competition actually is doing it. Ask these questions. Are they appealing to the same target customer base? And that's a good question to always ask yourself as you go out and do those surveys. How much do they actually charge? That's a big, broad question to explore. And that's where you can have an advantage too, because if you can either upcharge or come below their price, maybe you might do better and do justice with what you're trying to offer. What are some of the things that they put out there in terms of their messaging for their advertising? How do they market themselves? What are they saying about their products? You might find that a lot of food trucks don't even actually advertise, or maybe they just have a Facebook page and that's it. And that's something to look at, because you want to do all the various things to leverage how you can put yourself out there, how you position yourself. And that also helps you separate yourself from the competition. So it's not just in the product or service, but it's also in how you present yourself. How do you position yourself? compare your reputation to their reputation. What does it mean? Maybe they've been offering fry bread for a long time, and the fry bread is just not good. So it's easy for you to upstage what they're offering and come up with solutions that really work for what you're trying to do. Yeah, and one of the other questions too is like, what are those advantages that they appear to have that is on the surface, and then what do they actually do that separates themselves from their competition as well. So when you look at your competition, just always ask yourself, what are they doing that is completely different? What are they doing that is so unique that separates them from other competition? And what can you do to separate yourself from that competition as well? And then this is back to that sort of core critical question that we always present or ask. How will I know if potential customers will actually want to pay for the products or services? As a part of that survey questionnaire and fielding all those concepts from all the customers that you want to go after, it's asking yourself, will they actually pay for it? Will the customers actually pay for it? And if other restaurants or other cafes or gas stations, other roadside vendors are doing the same thing, what are you going to do to separate yourself to kind of guarantee or make sure that customers actually pay for your product? And there's always variations in how you can present a product and package it, or present the services that you're offering and present it. But it's always at the core going to come back to convenience. Are you in a place, are you in a location that just works really well and serves a lot of people, and you're able to target the key people that you want to go after? And where are those customers going to choose to go? Because they might actually have a deep preference for going inside a brick and mortar space. And if you've tried out your food truck, or you've asked those questions, maybe people just don't want to go to a food truck because it's just too cold and we got like 6 months of winter. And maybe that just is too much for people to even deal with. So there's probably an advantage that like a booth at the flea market might have over a food truck. And maybe because your customer segment base actually goes to the flea market first, or that's where they only prefer to go, you might be better off just being a flea market vendor and an entrepreneur that works at the flea market. But it's worth it to explore all these possibilities as you ask those questions around competition, and decide what truly is your competition doing. Where are they serving the products? Where are they putting out those services that you're competing with? And figure out the creative ways to come up with the concepts and ideas around how you can separate yourself in the competition. So next slide, Holly. So one way to look at how to gather that information about the competition and then the market that you want to go after is looking at this from a couple of perspectives. You want to look at it from the industry perspective, meaning what's happening in the food industry. Say you want to open this Pinon food truck concept, and you look at the overall food industry in your local area, and you notice that maybe there's only 2 or 3 people in that sort of landscape, and there's only maybe 2 other food vendors that work on the side of the highway, and maybe 1 that's next to a gas station. And so you want to look at that larger market and industry and see what's happening there, and start to identify what exactly is happening, the ecosystem that exists, and how are the customers able to support those businesses. So how can you take those customers and bring them and attract them to your business? And that's where you start to do the research around those customers specifically. And when you do those surveys, you start to get a good sense of what's happening in your market, and the research that you're doing around that to figure out your customers, and what they gravitate toward, what are they attracted to, what is it that draws them in, and asking all those questions as you go out and try to identify those customers. I'm going to move over because the sun is blasting in my face. Sorry, guys. But as we move to the next slide, one of the great things about doing that industry market research is you get to really get a good sense of your local ecosystem, the local economy. And the more informed you are about the local economy, especially like a place like Pinon, and you want to open that Pinon food truck in Pinon because that's where your market is, if you look at everything that exists in that ecosystem, you start to get a really good sense of how everything operates and how all the businesses even function. And this slide just kind of highlights all the key areas to consider. And I've mentioned, sort of that location importance, how big that market size is going to be, and how do you dwindle that down? What's happening in the economy that gives you an idea of what to move toward in terms of pricing. And then is it super saturated with how many people are offering the same or similar product? And look at how you can generate that demand, or if the demand already exists. So these are just kind of some of the key points to consider when you're doing that research into the market. And then next slide. So what differentiates your business idea from the competition? That's one of the core questions we've been asking. So in this next slide, we want to just kind of touch on what exactly it is that differentiates your business idea from the competition. Holly, I'm going to just move to the next slide real quick. Sorry. And the way to get to that is competitive advantage. And we're going to move into the competitive advantage in the next segment or section. But one of the things that I want to talk about really quickly is how you position and proposition your product, or the value of that product that you're offering. And the product could be entailing all of the things that come with the food truck. It could be just a high quality service. It could be how glitz and glam your food truck is. Maybe there's a feature on it that's pretty amazing. But it's looking at the overall package and considering what is it that's going to allow you to separate yourself from the competition. And that then lends itself to being your competitive advantage. And you look at it holistically, and you look at it sort of from a broader perspective of like, what are all those little elements that helps you separate yourself from that competition, and that becomes your value proposition. And I think we're going to move towards that in the next segment tomorrow, it looks like. Yeah. So but that's kind of like a quick glimpse into those three boxes or three sections on this Idea Validator worksheet. And as we all move through trying to start a business, like I've mentioned before, it's okay to keep coming back to scratching off what you initially wrote, and don't hesitate, and then start fresh again, or just hit the reset button and completely just start on a whole new sheet or document. And you have to just kind of keep working through this over and over. And don't be afraid to mark it up and get it really dirty and play with the worksheet, so that you can really take some of those concepts that work and put them aside. And then if you find things that don't necessarily work, but you're kind of curious, if you test them out, what they might do. I've always created personally like a system called the Vault, and I put ideas that I have into a vault. And that's just my way of kind of working through the ideas or concepts around how to flesh out certain aspects, especially in like a business idea validator. And it's been really helpful to kind of come back to that over and over. So Holly, do you want to do a recap too of something that might be on your mind? Oh.
Awesome.
Yeah, so like what we kind of talked about today is like a lot of it's a great thing because like now we have essentially puzzle pieced together a ton of the whys. So a lot of you who have already started kind of writing down the description and the operations of your business in that first box, and now being able to identify again a little bit of the start of like why you got into this business idea. And your solution is reiterating that, of talking about like the problem and opportunity. I think with some individuals that we talked about. So again, if we take Change Labs as a great example of a business idea, and if we didn't exist, how would we start as a nonprofit organization on the reservation? The problem and opportunity for Change Labs was like there needs to be more support for Indigenous entrepreneurs to start their business or grow and thrive it. So the solution was bringing in coaching services, creating a co-working space so people had access to internet, access to printing, to essentially like an office workspace for individuals to have when they don't essentially have that in rural parts, or even it's harder to obtain because of the barriers that we know in rural parts on the Navajo Nation and frequently around the nomination that just having a smartphone, sometimes you don't have strong signal to, do a lot of these things. So our solution was creating that space, creating the eShip hub, creating essentially like a lending program so that we're able to like get money into the hands of business owners who their barrier is to essentially receive funds and financial aid to help grow their business more quickly. And so, that could be our solution for Change Labs. And then our customer segment is Indigenous business owners. We have always had this question down the road of, do we service all of Indian country or like who exactly is our services for? Well, that's essentially our customer segments can be many different customer segments for the programming that we have. So for example, those of you who are, I don't know, thinking about doing a pure e-commerce business versus a physical location, those are two different customer segments that you could hit. Some could overlap of buying and purchasing. There was an individual that was sharing that, I'm going to bring up that Airbnb example that we had too yesterday in person at the eShip hub. She was talking about a ton of different individuals that would be able to benefit from her having an Airbnb on Hopi. So each one of those sets of individuals that she was talking about, their reasoning to be in that area or need lodging was a certain set of different customer segments that she was identifying that her business could supplement. So for example, for our nonprofit of Change Labs, one of them is an individual, an entrepreneur who resides on Navajo and Hopi, who's looking for a microloan. Like they would be greatly serviced by our kinship lending program. Maybe an entrepreneur who has an idea, like all of you who are on this call, who have an idea of a business, you guys are supplemented by our eShip support program. So, and also too, the whole entire high commitment, low commitment, where are you guys really kind of at in all of this business that you guys, some of you who are probably have a business, wanting it to grow a lot more. Also too, probably still in that startup phase of 1 to 2 years, or even to need way more support than just getting started, could be perfect for our cohort program of our incubator program. Also too, we help in the sense of trying to connect with other organizations to replicate what we do here at Change Labs in the sense of not trying to expand and duplicate another Change Labs, but essentially be able to work with other organizations to help kind of understand why we choose to do the processes that we do. That's a business to business customer segment that we're building right there. And as well as too, like community work that we do. People who are not trying to start a business, but instead are like very much in the presence of Tuba City and seeing what we're doing. Like they're also another customer segment that we want to be actively a part of the community. We see how very viable it is as a nonprofit who's trying to help change a lot of biases and bust myths around entrepreneurship, that we need to be a part of the community to do so. And therefore, it's another customer segment. So although it may seem like we try to reach everybody, we have certain and specific programming or activities within quote unquote our business that we do to reach certain customer segments. So that's why it's like, even though individuals may be starting an organization and they're like, we can help everybody, that's not always the case, because, you may have specific services or activities that you can identify through your business operations that you can essentially attach to a certain customer segment or a certain demographic that you would reach and be able to help. So I'm trying to think of other types of examples that would be helpful for anybody who's here. I know we shared business ideas yesterday. So if there's like any extra help that you guys need of working through these 3 boxes, especially around the customer segments and competition, if that ends up where you're starting to like bullet point a ton of realizations that you're having about those 2 areas that you're identifying, and they help kind of modify your solution and your overall business idea, or even too, it helps modify the problem and opportunity. Maybe, as Dwayne said, there's something that your competitors that you've identified that are doing something, and you know that you can do it way better. There's always like certain opportunities whenever you go into the research of identifying your customer segments and as well as your competition that kind of modify the first 3 boxes that we worked on. So if that happens, that's okay. And that's as we really kind of encourage to have multiple stickies on top of it. this is supposed to be written in pencil, not in Sharpie. And if it is, that's okay. You can get a new piece of paper. But essentially, this is a great place to start organizing a ton of your ideas, especially for those who are just getting started. And this feels like a very intimidating process to figure out, is this business viable? Or even to what we're going to cover tomorrow, how can I make money from this? Even doing this as a nonprofit, you need to be sustainable within your operations, of understanding how can we continue to keep this sustainable inflow of operation costs going. So, tomorrow we'll talk everything about money tomorrow. Super excited. I'll be leading that of our day 3 workshop. It'll be completely virtual. We'll be starting here at 9 a.m. Like via eShip Hub, and then 12 p.m. Again, I'll be joining remotely, but however, you guys are very much welcome to occupy the space at 12 p.m. here at a eShip Hub in Tuba City. Sorry, my AirPod keeps kind of falling out, so I keep adjusting it. But yeah, is there any questions so far? I know we ended right on time, and I kind of pushed us past that end time. So as always, we have 4 p.m. Optional group coaching. For those of you who have never done consulting or coaching before, or have had that one-on-one before, this is a great kind of easy way to experience it. And you only have to share what you feel comfortable with sharing. So I'll leave it there in case there's any type of Q&A that's happening in the chat. We are going to close the Zoom room. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye, guys.